Ahoy there, mates! Jim Varney June rolls on here at the VHS pirate ship, and today we're going to talk about Dr. Otto. More specifically, I'm going to be examining the film in which he's featured in, Dr. Otto and The Riddle of the Gloom Beam. Now, it's arguable, but it could be said that outside of Ernest, Dr. Otto is Jim Varney's best-known character. The very unique design and portrayal of this character led him to have some real estate in most of our memories. He certainly stands out, and though rather zany, Dr. Otto is the perfect supervillain, a mutated, mad science-y type genius bent on world domination. And these character traits are best displayed in Dr. Otto and The Riddle of the Gloom Beam, which was released in theaters July 19th, 1985. And this not only would be Dr. Otto's big screen debut, but the Ernest P. Worrell characters as well. Though he's not in the film very long, but despite this fact, they certainly used it to promote this movie. Hey, you use what you got, and at the time, nobody knew who Dr. Otto was, but they were very much aware of Ernest. So Ernest isn't in this for very long. But Jim Varney certainly makes up for that by portraying a litany of other characters, including the debut of one of his other famous characters, Auntie Nelda. This movie is a testament to the acting skills of Jim Varney, skills that were often underrated. And though this movie is a great showcase of his ability, that's really about it. This movie was absolutely, utterly, and totally despised by critics and basically anyone who went to go see it. It's since gained cult acclaim, certainly amongst Jim Varney fans, and is regarded as one of the greatest B-movies. But those accolades took a little while to achieve, and doesn't change the fact that this movie is still dog shit. Yeah, it's one of those things where your memory is better than reality, because if you watch this again, you are more than likely not going to enjoy it if you ever did. Just the mere fact that this movie even exists is really good enough, and it's satisfactory without watching it, because the concept is pretty great. It is what it is. It is a perfect B movie. All in all, this movie is pretty demented, with a lot of bizarre and strange imagery that was pretty unsettling for kids. And kids, of course, wanted to go see this because of Ernest. Marketing throughout the mid-'80s was a pretty strange thing. Hell, there was a talking Freddy Krueger doll that really should not have existed. And then there was stuff like Max Headroom, which started off as a dystopian movie about the dangers of big media and ended up becoming a Coke commercial. Yeah, it was a pretty bizarre landscape back then, and Dr. Otto fits perfectly into that. I remember as a kid watching this movie thinking it was an Ernest film, only to find out it most certainly was not. A lot of it just really freaked me out, and I wasn't expecting that. So yes, I had seen this when I was a kid, and I had seen it again about 20 years ago, so I decided to give this movie another whirl. You get it? Another whirl? Ernest P. Worrell? You get it? Never mind. Yeah, I wanted to see if this movie is really as awful as I remembered, so I popped in my 1986 Knowhutimean Home video VHS distribution to find out. And after watching this again, I discovered it totally is. This movie is rather bad, and I gotta tell you, I didn't enjoy it at all. It wasn't because this movie is low budget. That never really bothers me, and plus, in this movie, you can't really tell. I know you're probably scoffing at that, but it doesn't look that bad, even though it does seem like there's Vaseline smeared on the camera lens, but I've seen worse, and so have you. And it wasn't because it's poorly acted, because all in all, it's not terrible. Once again, I've seen worse, and so have you. Even if it was poorly acted and the low budget was terribly noticeable, I can forgive those things. But what I can't forgive is a movie being boring. And oddly enough, that is precisely what this movie is. Yes, it does have bizarre imagery, interesting concepts, and some pretty decent gags, but those are just too far in between for it to really matter. The movie is just so slow and drawn out. It does have its good parts, but it's just so agonizing to get to them. The agony simply overshadows the entertainment. A movie is the sum of its parts, after all, and if you're going to have more boring parts than good, well, your movie's going to be boring. This film should not be boring. It has an interesting concept. In fact, it's very original. As you may or may not know, Dr. Otto seeks to rid the world of any financial value, making money useless and turning the entire world into a dystopian wonderland. And another original aspect of this movie is that he succeeds. Yes, spoiler alert here, the bad guy wins. But I gotta tell you, the good guys are actually so insufferable that you really don't mind. Yep, you don't care if they lose, and you actually end up rooting for Dr. Otto, even if it means the ruination of the world. This movie is pretty unique, and you certainly are not going to see anything like it anywhere, at least anytime soon, and the only problem I really have with this movie is that it's just too slow. If the pace was just a little bit quicker, this film would be firing on all cylinders. Aside from that, that, it does scratch that B-movie itch. It is in the what the hell did I just watch category, and part of its charm is the fact that it's so bizarre. Adding to this film's bizarrity and mystique and enigma and whatever else you want to call it is the fact that when it was first released overseas, it went by the name Never Get Poop on Your Shoes. Yes, that's 100% true. Now, Dr. Otto wasn't going to stop with simply one movie. There were plans to have a sequel, and it was going to be called Dr. Otto and the Song of the Tarantula Women. However, plans would change after Touchstone Pictures, a subsidiary of Disney, bought the movie rights to the Ernest character and planned on doing an Ernest trilogy. Therefore, Dr. Otto and the Song of the Tarantula Women was altered to Ernest versus the Tarantula Women, which I'm very certain that would have been something to see. However, Touchstone Pictures did not like the idea, as it would be way too weird for them. And somehow, that's how we got Ernest Goes to Camp. Yeah, it's sort of hard to see how they arrived at that decision, but I guess it was a matter of compromise. Touchstone Pictures, being what they are, prefers more family-oriented material, and I'm sure Ernest versus the Tarantula Women wouldn't have been family-oriented. At least not on its face. I mean, come on, that title alone's a little suspect. But it does make you wonder what could have been and which movie you would have rather had. Oh well, it is what it is. Now, Dr. Otto and The Riddle of the Gloom Beam, like any other cult classic, would achieve its real fame in its afterlife on VHS. It was first released, as I mentioned earlier, in 1986 by Knowhutimean Home Video. Who were they, you ask? Well, that's a good question. They were the exclusive, as in one and only VHS distributor of all pre-Touchstone Pictures Ernest material. They were the home video arm of Carden and Cherry Productions, the people behind the Ernest character. Though they were impactful, this home video distributor only lasted a few years and would dry up shortly after Touchstone Pictures acquired the rights to Ernest. They only had a couple of titles in their library, and those titles would be sold off to Good Times Home Video in 1990. They would eventually repackage and re-release all of those titles in 1992, including Dr. Otto and The Riddle of the Gloom Beam. Out of these two distributions, the 1986 Knowhutimean Home Video one is the more rare, but they both can command some pretty high asking prices. But really, the same could be said for any Ernest VHS, especially pre-Touchstone Pictures releases. Dr. Otto, in and of himself, was a pretty interesting character, very distinct, and certainly was unique, but they really didn't do much else with him. He would pop in occasionally on the Hey Vernus Ernest Saturday morning television show, but that's really about it. I'm guessing, based on the costume's design, it was more than likely a production nightmare, which would be why they didn't do more with the character. Hey, I can understand that, and I certainly don't blame them, but it would have been interesting to see another Dr. Otto movie, hopefully one that was a little bit quicker paced. Perhaps we should have gotten another Dr. Otto movie instead of Ernest Rides Again, or any of the other post-Touchstone Pictures Ernest movies for that matter. As far as Jim Varney's arsenal of characters goes, Dr. Otto may not be as memorable as Ernest, but he certainly left his mark. He stands proudly amongst other 80s cult icons, and I'm really surprised there wasn't any merchandise for this character. And I'm even more surprised that Todd McFarlane never did a Dr. Otto figure for his movie Maniac series. Remember those? Sure you do, and Dr. Otto would have fit right in. Even though myself and many others consider Dr. Otto and The Riddle of the Gloom Beam to be sort of a snooze fest, it did prove that Jim Varney has a bit of a bizarre and dark side. And at a time when Ernest was being pushed as a kid-friendly commercial character, Dr. Otto was in the background conjuring up some weird shit. Well, that about does it, and I hope you enjoyed this special Jim Varney June edition of tonight's viewing. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe and keep it locked right here to Captain Anna's VHS pirate ship as Jim Varney June rolls on. Take care out there, and remember, never get poop on your shoes. And I'll see you next time, only on Captain Adam's VHS pirate ship.